Grammy-nominated opera singer Jubilant Sykes was fatally stabbed at his Southern California home, authorities said Tuesday. The Santa Monica Police Department identified the alleged assailant as his son, Micah Sykes, 31, and said in a statement that he was booked on suspicion of homicide. It wasn't immediately clear if Micah Sykes has a lawyer. Jubilant Sykes, 71, was found Monday night with critical injuries at the family's Santa Monica home after authorities responded to a report of an assault in progress, the department said. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Micah Sykes was found inside the house and taken into custody without incident, the department said. A weapon was recovered and is being processed with other physical evidence, according to the department. The department said it is forwarding the case to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Jubilant Sykes was a classically trained baritone whose music was influenced by gospel, jazz, and folk. His rendition of Leonard Bernstein's Mass was nominated for a Grammy Award in 2010. The world first learned the details, in short. Bare-bones statements from police and local news outlets. But the truth is that the story surrounding Jubilant Sykes' death is not merely a crime report. It is a tragic unraveling of a life that had touched thousands. It is the collapse of a family that had once been united by faith, music, and a deep desire to bring beauty into the world. Behind the cold wording of a press release, there was a home full of memories, arguments, hopes, and heartbreaks. There was a father who spent decades using his voice to lift people, and a son who at some point became lost enough to be standing over the father who once carried him. And there was a moment, one terrible, split-second moment when everything fell apart so violently that even seasoned officers felt the weight of the scene as they walked inside, neighbors on the quiet Santa Monica street later described hearing voices earlier in the evening. Nothing that sounded like a fight, but more like a tense conversation. The kind where the words may be low, but the emotions run high. The kind where anyone watching from afar senses that something old, something unresolved is finally cracking open. People saw lights on inside the home, shadows moving across the living room walls, and then the sudden sound of someone running, perhaps a panicked attempt to flee, or perhaps simply the chaos of a situation spiraling out of control. And then, finally, the call. The one made by a voice trembling with fear and disbelief. It was a call that no one ever imagines themselves making. A call that shatters a family forever before anyone even arrives to confirm it. Inside the home, the scene was one that contradicted everything that defined Jubilant Sykes' public persona. He was known for warmth, humility, and a peaceful spirit that radiated from him, whether he was performing on grand stages or speaking casually with fans outside a theater. He had been praised for years for his ability to fuse classical technique with gospel soul, for singing with an emotional honesty that felt less like performance and more like a prayer in the form of music. There was something sacred about the way he sang, something that audiences felt in their bones. But inside that house on Monday night, sacredness had been replaced by violence, confusion, and a silence that would follow the family forever. Police entered cautiously, fully aware that domestic calls can shift rapidly and dangerously. They didn't know what they would find, who would be holding the weapon, or whether someone might still be in danger. But instead of an active confrontation, they found the aftermath. They found the singer critically wounded on the floor, his body marked by the violent struggle that had just taken place. They found a weapon nearby, something now transformed from an ordinary household item into evidence of the most irreversible act a child can commit against a parent. And they found Micah still inside, not resisting, not fleeing, as though he had either surrendered to reality or was dissociated from it entirely. Officers described him as cooperative, almost strangely calm, giving the kind of subdued compliance that raises more questions than answers. For many who knew the family, the news felt impossible to process. Friends described Micah as a complex individual, someone who had struggled over the years, but who was also deeply loved by his parents. There were whispers that he had wrestled with personal demons, issues that might have included mental health challenges, periods of instability, internal battles that his family tried for years to help him overcome. But none of them ever imagined violence. Certainly not this. Certainly not something so final. And so the story of Jubilant Sykes' death is also the story of how even the most loving, supportive families can find themselves overshadowed by forces too difficult to navigate, especially when those forces take root inside one of their own. Those who knew Sykes personally spoke about how deeply he loved his children, how he believed in offering them second chances, and how his faith influenced his patience and compassion. He had a way of listening that made people feel safe. He had a way of talking that made even heavy conversations feel grounded. But sometimes love, no matter how deep, cannot fully heal someone who is unraveling from the inside. Sometimes even the most steadfast parent finds themselves face to face with a storm they cannot stop. As the investigation moved forward, police worked to recover evidence, blood patterns, fingerprints on the weapon, the layout of the room, the timestamps of the 911 call. But there are parts of the truth that evidence can never fully capture. Evidence can describe where people stood. It can describe what was used. It can describe the timeline down to the minute. But it cannot describe the years that led to the moment. It cannot describe the emotional fractures that grew quietly beneath the surface. It cannot describe the pain in a father's heart when he looks at a child he loves but no longer fully recognizes. And it cannot describe the split-second decision that turns a lifetime of love into an instant of irreversible tragedy. In the days that followed, tributes began pouring in. Fans shared videos of his performances, clips of him singing with a conviction that made even unfamiliar music feel intimate. Clips of him standing on stage, eyes closed, as though letting the music move through him rather than the other way around. His Grammy nomination was mentioned frequently, but for those who admired him, awards were not the heart of his legacy. His legacy was emotional depth. His legacy was sincerity. His legacy was the way he sang with warmth that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. His legacy was the way he made music feel like home. Colleagues recalled stories of him backstage, always humble, always gracious, always more interested in connecting than impressing. He had a reputation for guiding younger singers, telling them not to chase perfection so much that they forget the soul of what they're singing. That advice stayed with many of them permanently. Stories surfaced about him visiting schools, performing for students, encouraging them to explore music not because it would make them famous, but because it makes people human. He cared about presence. He cared about meaning. He cared about the quiet ways art can save a person. The tragedy has left many wrestling with the contradiction between his spirit and his death. How can someone who dedicated his life to beauty end in a moment of brutality? How can a man who brought peace to so many die in a storm created within his own family? Those questions don't have easy answers.